Hi, my name is Melanie Herman, and this is the Southern Dairy Challenge Reproduction Seminar. All right, guys, I'm going to teach you a whole semester's worth of reproduction in 20 minutes. So let's do this. So we're going to start out by just reviewing some reproductive benchmarks. I know some of you guys have already had Repro classes, but this way we get kind of all on the same playing field. So conception rate. If I bred 100 cows last month and 40 of them became pregnant, that is going to be a 40% conception rate. I'd like to see this number greater than 40% for first service and greater than 35% overall for the southern region. Heat detection rate. So theoretically, every 21 days, a cow comes in heat if they're open. And so let's say that we only find 40 of those cows out of what the computer says is 100 eligible cows. Then we have a 40% rate. So again, heat detection rate is really a calculation that the computer software program says that every 21 days, the cow should come into heat. My goal for herds is to have a 60% or higher heat detection rate, but I do not want to see it over 80% because again, the computer is calculating that this cow is going to come into heat every 21 days. The chances are we have cows that have 24-day cycles or 25-day or 18-day cycles. And so anything over 80%, I look at it when I work with herds as we were a little bit too aggressive because in the real world, you're not going to have greater than 80% of your herd actually coming into heat every 21 days. For instance, most herds, about 20% of your cows are anestrus and not cycling anyway. And so if I do see a heat detection rate over 80%, I'm going to work with those technicians. I'm probably going to see it in the conception rates that they're not as high as they should be because we're breeding cows that aren't truly in heat. Pregnancy rate. So a very simplified equation for preg rate is we take that conception rate times the heat detection rate. But in real life, it involves a little bit more than that. But for this scenario, we're going to calculate that preg rate with the 40% conception rate, 40% heat detection rate equals a 16% preg reg. My goal for herds is greater than 24% in the southern region. Now, I do have some herds in South Florida that are closing in on a 30% preg rate for a yearly average, and that's phenomenal. But for very well-managed herds in the southern region, if they have a 24 or 25% preg rate, I am super happy. So what are eligible cows? These would be cows that are past their volunteer waiting period. And that volunteer waiting period is when the farm decides that they're going to start breeding cows. This number for most herds is based on the health of their fresh cows. And so this number can be between 60, 80 days, somewhere. We still want to have those cows get their first service in a timely manner. But we don't want to be breeding too early because they're not ready to get pregnant yet. But as far as the computer goes and your data goes, it is going to start counting the day they hit their volunteer waiting period. So with heat detection rate and all that, it's all based on that 60-day volunteer waiting period or 70-day volunteer waiting period. And so that number is very important to know when you're analyzing a farm. So how do we find the repro numbers? There's a lot of information when we're looking at reproductive data. You can get it from the DHI sheets. You can also look in the herd management software, such as PCDART or DairyComp. So in PCDART, if you go up to the top and you click on tracker, there's a bunch of different tracker programs. Conception Tracker does a really good job of being able to answer reproductive questions. You can choose your view, which is what's highlighted here. You can go by month, day of the week, sire, service number, lactation number, heat interval, all different things. You can choose your range that you want to look at, cows or heifers. You can even decide which lactation number. If you only want to look at third and greater lactations to see how the mature cows are doing, you can choose that. On the breeding filters tab, you can do everything from choosing different breeding codes to different technicians. Service sire filters, you can look at just conventional or sex semen. And then you would click on your preview button. And oh, this was just kind of an example of that drop down menu. For this example, I am choosing the actual interval to show you. So a little chart pops up. And so for this chart, for instance, it'd be the conception rates based on when that cow was bred again after the previous service. And we look at the days since bred intervals. So we look at this 18 to 24 range a lot. So 18 to 24 days ago, she was bred. She came into heat again, and we bred her. So conception rates are obviously always important, but I also look at the percentage. So for this chart, it's really important to know how many of those cows did we actually put semen in at their next heat. And I like this number to be over 30%. And in Florida and the southern region, with good tail chalk technicians, 30% is definitely attainable. We also would look at how many cows are going to preg check before they get bred again. And that number is also really important. So in dairy comp, you would go up to the top line here and type in bred sum. And a similar chart will come up, and you can click on which one you want. Again, I chose the heat interval just to stay consistent. So just like in PC Dart, this is obviously a different herd. The numbers are flipped around from left to right a little bit differently. But again, this particular herd, that 18 to 24 day range, they've hit that 30% with a really nice conception rate there as well. So when we look at conception rates, there's a ton of different ways to look at them. So conception rates by lactation number. Is there a difference in the amount of pregnancies generated by a first lactation cow versus the mature cows? So your mature cows on a farm are going to have higher milk production. They have higher lactational stress. They're going to not get pregnant as easily as a first lactation cow, which isn't milking as much and doesn't have as many health problems. Those first lactation cows should be the easiest group of cows in a milking herd to get pregnant. So if you're looking at your data and your mature cows are outperforming your younger cows, that would be a question for the herd, is why aren't your first lactation cows performing? Conception rate by service number. So again, this first service conception rate should always be the highest. When you have a group of cows, every time they get pregnant, you take those pregnant animals out of that breeding group, and your group that's left becomes less fertile because your fertile cows got pregnant. So in your first service group, you have the most fertile cows in that group. And as they get pregnant and you move through to higher service numbers, you have less and less fertile cows in that population. So again, if I'm looking at a chart and my third, fourth, fifth services have higher conception rates than my first and second service, then I'm going to kind of say, okay, what's going on with this herd? Why aren't they getting pregnant early in lactation? Do they have calving issues? Is their body condition poor? Stuff like that. And so again, another way to look at those conception rates, like I mentioned previously with the PC Dart, is we can look at it by sires, day of the week, days in milk, technician. There's a whole bunch of different ways that we can analyze conception rates. So for heat detection rates, it's really how many cows are we finding in heat. So if I'm on farm, I'm going to look at the cows that were selected for breeding, and I'm going to look for cows that are in heat that may have been missed and try and judge how these technicians are deciding which cows to breed. In the records, I look for the heat detection rate by looking at the heat detection rate and pregnancy rate report. So in dairy comp, that would be just your 21-day preg rate under the bred sum. And on PC Dart, this would be your 126. And we can see every 21 days what the pregnancy rate was and what the heat detection rate was. Heat interval, the graphs that I just showed you, those are excellent ways to see how heat detection rate is on the farm. What percent of all those breedings are taking place in that 18 to 24 days since bred interval? And then what are the conception rates as well? If the conception rates are really high and the percentage is lower to mid, then I'm going to push my technicians to breed more cows because they're not taking enough risk and they're only breeding those really hot heats, and we're missing a chance to get cows pregnant. If that percentage is really high and the conception rates are low, then obviously they're just breeding anything that walks by. So we like to have it middle of the range there on both. The other thing, like I mentioned, is how many cows are going to preg check. So are we missing the opportunity at 21 to 24 days when those cows should be coming into heat on their own? Are the majority of the animals going to preg check before we find them open and then resync them to get them bred? And we're missing opportunities there, and days open are going to go up. So part of reproduction is transition issues. So if we have fresh cows that are having metabolic problems, then it is going to affect reproduction. These metabolic disease rates are good indicators of how those cows made it through their transition, made it through calving. And so reproduction is impacted by this. Overstocking can also have a negative effect on these fresh cows, which is why we always recommend less than 80% stocking density in that fresh cow pen. So I'm going to give you guys some goals for metabolic diseases that you can find in various ways. I think for this competition, they gave you lists of all of the health events. So for milk fever, I want to see less than 3 to 5% of all mature cow calvings. DAs, I want less than 3 to 5% of all calvings. RPs, less than 8% of all calvings. Metritis, less than 15%. Dystocia, less than 10%. Stillbirths, less than 8%. And so next, we're going to talk about heat stress and how it affects reproduction. In the southern region, heat abatement is huge. It's very important. So what is temperature humidity index? I'm going to refer to it a lot as THI. So if you guys have not seen this chart before, down the left-hand side is the temperature outside, and across the top is the humidity. So if you say it's 86 degrees outside, but it's a 60% humidity, which is probably an average day in Florida, then that's going to be a THI of 80. Okay, so kind of keep that number in mind that I said that THI, well, yeah, that's fine for 80. So heat stress is really anything over 65. So if the THI is over 65, that cow is heat stressed, because the definition is that that cow has to produce more than 77 pounds of milk per day. And that's pretty much all of our cows in the southern region. So pretty much the whole year, we have heat stress on our cows, which is why it's really important. So in a low humidity region, not the South, any THI greater than 72, for every unit over 72, a cow is going to lose a little less than half a pound of milk per day. In a high humidity region, i.e. us down here everywhere, we're losing 0.86 pounds of milk per THI unit over 72. So if I've got a herd, and today it's a THI of 82 outside, and I'm going to probably lose 8.6 pounds of milk per cow per day. So on a 1,000 cow dairy, I'd be losing 8,600 pounds of milk per day. This is huge. So how do we help our herds? Okay, evaporative cooling. Hopefully you guys have learned about this. Evaporative cooling, all it is we spray water on the cow, and then we have fans that blow air across their backs, and as it blows that water off of them, it cools them. Picture yourself in a swimming pool, and you get out and you're all wet, and the wind blows and you get a chill and you get goosebumps. That's evaporative cooling. So the holding pen is our #1 priority. I want to see 1 fan per 20 cows with a minimum of 3 fans. So if my holding pen holds 100 cows, I want to see like 5 fans at the least. Those fans are going to turn on at 65 degrees and they're going to run continuously. The sprinklers and the soakers should turn on at 65 to 68. Now, this is the important part. For evaporative cooling to truly work efficiently, we need that water to turn on and turn off. If water is just on all the time, then that cow is building up its own little humid region where she's never really getting any relief from the humidity and from that water. And so for evaporative cooling to truly work well, the water has to get turned off, and then the air is moved across the backs, and that water comes off of that cow. We always want to offer water in the return alley. Cows are going to consume 10% of their daily water requirement immediately after milking. If that water is not available to them after they milk, they're going to go back to their pen and they're going to go right up to fresh feed that's there, and they're going to eat, which is good. We want them to go eat so that the teats and stern can close up and not have mastitis issues and all that. But we've now missed our chance to increase their daily water intake. okay? And then fans in a parlor will always help cool cows during milking. I like to see fans in the parlor. So this is a picture of a great example of a herd that I work with. You can see the fans in the parlor. You can see a rapid exit here. The cows leave the parlor. They go right over here to this fresh, delicious looking water before they return to their pens. So out in the barns, I, again, want to see those fans turn on at 65 degrees and run continuously. I'd love to see fans over every row of stalls as well as over the feed bunk. So in this picture, it's a great example. We've got an outer row of stalls with fans, and then the two inner rows have a fan over each one, and then as well over the feed bunk. Now, in some herds, you'll see these alternate every other post. So this post will have one on the left and the next post will have it on the right. But ideally, you'd have like 10 stalls in between each fan. And when you alternate them, then it becomes 20 stalls between each fan. And so by the time you get to like the 12th, 13th stall, there's like no airflow left. And so we want to see the water troughs. They equal about 4 inches per cow in a pen. And if that cow anywhere in that pen, she should be within 80 feet of a waterer. Most of the commercial waterers that you see on dairies are going to be about 10 feet in length. So if we have a pen that holds 100 cows, I need at least 3 of those waterers. So sprinklers and soakers that are in the barns. Okay, so again, turn them on at 68 degrees. Automation is a great thing. The less time that you have to rely on somebody to go turn on a switch, the better. And so I like to see all the fans and sprinklers on timers and thermostats. Again, with the sprinklers, I want them on and then they turn off. Out in the barns, we actually will change how often they turn on and off based on what the ambient temperature is. So as that THI goes up, we're going to decrease it down to 5-minute cycles for every time the water turns on. I think I've said it enough, but water is very important on a dairy. If we could put waterers wherever we can, that's great, even if it's only temporary through the summer. But I will have guys that'll just put tubs out wherever they can, especially on those long walkways. If those cows have a long walk into the parlor, it's great to see waterers to and from. So this is an example that I use for every heat abatement talk that I give. So a few years back, I had 2 dairies. They were side by side in South Florida. They were the same owners, same management, same barn type, same age of cows, same average days on milk, same feed, same nutritionist, veterinarian, everything was the same between these 2 dairies. The owners decided that dairy number 2 had older barns. So in May 2015, they replaced all the fans in the barn and they doubled the number. So before they were alternating every other post. And so when they replaced them, they had 2 fans on every post. Okay, so they doubled the number of fans that they had. They thought dairy number 1 was sufficient. They had newer barns, fans look good, everything's good, we're not going to worry about it. The results said otherwise. So we had a meeting that winter and we went through this. So you can see on these graphs, those fans at dairy number 2 were installed in June, and you can see how every 21-day period since then that preg rate went up. And dairy number 1 is very typical Florida summer. You have some good weeks, you have some bad weeks, but it's up and down throughout the whole summer. After we had that meeting in January of 2016, they doubled the number of fans in barn 1, replaced them. And now both of those herds, actually, this slide's a little old because now they're actually, both those herds are touching 30% preg rate, annual preg rates, which in Florida is phenomenal. They're one of my best repro herds that I work with. But even in the summertime, like they don't get below like a 24 or 25 preg rate, and their barns are amazing to walk through. Like you feel wonderful on a hot summer day. So additional ways that we cool cows. So if we cool them during their dry periods, they're going to give more milk next lactation. We use some cooling ponds. We use some shade cloth. So now we're going to move into, I'm going to spend the last couple minutes, I've already gone over a little bit on my time, but we're going to spend the last couple minutes here talking about your presentations to the judges. Okay, so statistics, yay. Okay, we love numbers, right? All the judges, we love to see numbers. But when you start diving into your numbers, make sure you have a lot of numbers. Make sure that there's a lot of animals in your argument, okay? We're gonna keep in mind how many are in that number set. So binomial variation, this is a very important, fun word. If I flip a coin 10 times, 8 of those 10 times I could get heads. So that's an 80% chance of me getting heads when I flip a coin, which doesn't make sense. However, if I flip that coin 500 times, the more times I flip that coin, you're going to get closer and closer to that 50% heads, tails percentage, which we all know is a real percentage, a real chance when you flip a coin. And so the same thing goes when we look at cow numbers, okay? I want to see at least 200 cows in a set before I'm going to go tell a farm to make a change or stop doing this or that. When I compare things like bulls, technicians, make sure they're about the same statistically speaking, okay? If I have a bull that's only been used for 20 breedings, there could have been something off that week on the farm or with a technician or something. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the bull's fault. And so I'm gonna, try and see like greater than 300 animals in a set before I really make a change. Same thing goes with breeders, if I've got a breeder that bred 500 cows and I have another breeder that only bred 100 cows, they could have a 5% difference in their conception rate and still be statistically the same, okay? And so don't make big number of changes unless we've got some numbers there. I want to see graphs and pictures, okay? If you want to tell me about something, make a graph, okay? If all you have are numbers, plug those numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, generate a graph, okay? A picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so I want to see those graphs and pictures. If you want to point out a bad trend or a number, throw a graph in there. If you want to talk about a bad situation, throw a picture. I know this year's a little bit different. You guys don't get to go on the farm and look at cows, but there are pictures supplied to you. So go through them. And if anything really stands out, throw it in your presentation. Show me the money, all right? I know the Jerry Maguire movie is like older than probably all of you guys, but show me the money. I want to see the economics. If I am going to make a change and I am going to take, and it's going to take me this much money to take over and do your recommendation, I have to get a return on that money. I have to make more money back than what it took me to do that change. All right. So if I'm the herd owner or the judge and you make a recommendation, you have to give me the incentive to make the change. And as a judge, we want to see that from you guys. Okay. Any questions?